Well, good morning and welcome to Stroke of Genius Podcast Executive Experience. I'm your host, Aaron Alva. I got a special guest for you today. Executive guest, Cindy Watson. She's a negotiating expert. She is CEO and founder of Women on Purpose. Cindy has spent over 30 years in law practice. Cindy has also dedicated her life now to helping women be the most powerful person they could be. Professional, it's amazing. She has been known as the barracuda of the boardroom. So we're going to be bringing her on. Let's bring her on now. Hold on.
The Stroke of Genius podcast, hosted by brain aneurysm and stroke survivor Aaron Avila, sharing the experiences of survivors and CEOs. This is your destination for inspiration.
Well, good morning, Cindy.
Hello there. It's great to be here, Aaron. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's really great you're coming to us. Introduce yourself. I know you're coming up to us from Canada, so introduce yourself a little bit.
Yeah, you bet. I'm a token Canadian. I'm born and bred in Toronto, but my work takes me all over the world. Being a lawyer, as you said, for over 30 years practicing social justice. But probably 5 or 6 years ago now, I had my epiphany and I founded Women on Purpose and created I call it the art of feminine negotiation programs, trying to help people generally, but women in particular, be able to step into their power and negotiate, leaning into those feminine traits that maybe they saw as a liability for a long time. So it's a passion project of mine.
Well, I know it's funny because I'm a stroke survivor, but I wasn't always a stroke survivor. And I was going over and doing my research on you. I started realizing I'm a victim of programming. I have been programmed just like you say, where we're male dominated, we're seen as aggressive, but I want to jump into it. I saw a TikTok, so anybody out there watching this, I will put the link to Cindy's TikTok. It's a gotta watch. It's really good. You did a great job, by the way, on that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Let's start out by saying, what do you see out there as a need that you're feeling? What is lacking?
Yeah. Great question, Aaron. And it's funny because my TED Talk, when I did it, it was at the beginning of COVID and everybody was acting like this was a new concept, this idea about leaning into your feminine. And through COVID, I think it's shaken up the world and people are now much more open to the idea. And let me say at the beginning, I think a lot of people, I get pushback about using the word feminine, but this is not actually gender-based, right? We all have masculine and feminine energy, but my TED Talk and what really prompted this for me, I feel like the world is out of balance, right? For so long, we've defined success based on this very competitive masculine model in business, certainly in politics, in our negotiations. So because of that, I think both men and women have been more and more sort of rejecting our feminine, seeing that as a liability, believing that's the only way to succeed. And so then we get this tip out of balance because we all have masculine and feminine, but everybody is leaning into their masculine. So you get more conflict, more polarized positions, which we're definitely seeing. And I was guilty. You mentioned about me being the barracuda. My clients called me the barracuda for many years at the beginning of my practice. And that wasn't my natural go-to growing up. And there's a really high cost that comes to everybody bringing that take no prisoners approach, believing that's the only way to succeed. And so, I had my epiphany about the high cost it was for me, and taking a look around at certainly the women and the men in my life who had sort of lost touch with their authentic self and were all showing up in business, causing this constant conflict. And I realized there's a better way to be able to get actually better outcomes, better solutions, better relationships, better buy-in. So that was what prompted me and why I think it's just so important today.
Well, I'm sold. I know I see this. You just mentioned the conflict because the bias, because of we're told we're getting into this. We're told church of God, it's man, church of God. We're
Yeah.
gonna talk about the power of you women having intuition, and I'm gonna talk to you about that. But I think it's really important to realize that women should not be discounted or minimized or anything. And I'm really excited. But let's get into that. I do have a question because I heard something that really kind of touched my heart. And you had a life event that taught you about trusting your intuition and go with your daughter.
Uh-huh.
Could you tell us about that? About that?
Yeah, and it's funny, and thanks for asking about that, Aaron, because that was an epiphany moment, but one of those changes. But I didn't recognize it at the time, or I shouldn't say that. I recognized at the time, but those patterns, that conditioning was so deep, I still snap back. But I'd been practicing law for some time, and I had my first child, and at 2 months old, she got diagnosed with a serious heart defect. And we ended up and she had to have open heart surgery. And we ended up at the hospital for sick kids in critical care for almost 3 months. She was one where everything that could go wrong went wrong. And at the time, you would have thought if there was ever a time that I would have brought that barracuda to the table, that would have been it, right? Because I'm fighting for her life every day in that hospital when things were going wrong. And the interesting thing that I didn't really appreciate until later was that I wasn't showing up that way. I was in a place of pure feminine, sort of, call it maternal power. So I was building rapport with the nurses, with the doctors, with the surgeons, with the administrators. I was bringing empathy to the table, commiserating with them. I was having to build trust, with my husband as I went toe to toe with the cardiologist, with the administrators, with the cardiologist. I was having to stay flexible. I really had to trust my intuition because I was often having to disagree with and trust my intuition against the world's leading cardiologist. And, and just being able to lean into that sense of feminine power. And sure enough, like at one point, the doctors had told us that Jade wasn't going to make it and that she needed to go in for surgery again. And at that point, Aaron, we'd been almost 3 months in the hospital and she was back to her birth weight. Like she'd gone in the hospital at 2 months. We're almost at 5 months now and she's still back at her birth weight, not responding. And I said, no. And the one cardiologist said to me, well, fine, because they're not used to being challenged. And they said, fine, but we don't believe she'll make it and it'll be on you.
Oh
And
my God!
like wrong thing to say, to the wrong woman at the wrong time. And he knew immediately that he'd stepped into it because I really, I came back. And then they had the chief cardiologist come down and talk to me. And I realized it was all of that time in the hospital was a form of negotiation, right? Every day, that negotiating dance. And so they are like, Mom, what is it you think we're not doing? And so I had to give a list of things. I wanted her off the ventilator because she hadn't been breathing on her own now for longer than she'd been alive at that point. And the longer you stay on, chances are you're never going to get off. So I gave all of my list of things, common sense stuff that I wanted done. And to their credit, they did it. And Aaron, they went from her saying that she wasn't going to survive unless we went back in to operate again, which she would never have survived. We were home within a week after that. So it was like a powerful lesson about the power of showing up from an authentic sort of place of feminine power, but also building trust and trusting your intuition and recognizing that it's a negotiation, which most of us don't. So that was
Oh
my
yeah, that is really true. Life is all negotiation, really. Marriage, your relationship with kids, everything, it's all negotiating. So I can appreciate that. But you talk about intuition. And we as men are told to trust our gut,
yeah.
told to get great, to trust our gut. And then I do recall growing up, it was a big push of saying trust a woman's intuition. I don't think it ever came up. But it's so true that little voice inside you will. Here you are. You just said you were going to with toe to toe neurosurgeon scratch with
Yeah.
your intuition.
Yeah, and it's tough, especially with the ventilator. I mean, that was And they all said Jade wasn't ready to come off. And I just had to trust my intuition that it was the right thing. And we're all standing, it was like a bad TV show, Aaron, right? We're standing in that room and they grudgingly agreed to do a trial, extubation. So they took the breathing tube out and she wasn't breathing. And they're counting down and then they call time, that then they're all rushing to reintubate her. And it's one of those of the intuition. I don't even know still to this day where it came from, but I was like, wait, no, just give her 5 more seconds. And like I say, it was a seed from a bad show. So then everybody freezes, and then the one nurse just starts counting. And it's like 5. And I am just willing her, Aaron, like, come on, Jade, you can do this. Please just breathe, take my power, take my strength. You are stronger than you know. And they're counting down. And sure enough, at like the last minute, all of a sudden, she takes that first breath on her own. And over.
God, that is so exciting. I mean, I'm just tickled pink of that. That's just amazing. I mean, that shows you the power of your intuition. Your intuition told you, here you are going to open the entire room of medical professionals. You tell everybody to stop. Do not reintubate her. I was on the intubator.
Oh,
And you told them all to stop. Your intuition told you, have them stop, give her 5 more seconds.
yeah.
Oh my God, that must have been intense.
It was intense. And it's funny when you talk about intuition, how I was talking about those skills that I brought. And again, it was at the time I wasn't aware of it. It wasn't until years later when I started developing the art of feminine negotiation, I dug in to see what the skills are that make for the best negotiators. And the irony here, and 5 out of 6 of the skills that most of the experts recognize make for the best negotiators are traits that people would consider to be feminine traits: rapport building, empathy, flexibility, intuition, and trust. The only one that's not considered feminine is assertiveness. And I think that's because people mix up assertive and aggressive. So it was like I was practicing my RFIT model, that art of feminine negotiation model, a decade before I ever even created it. It was an interesting epiphany for me when I recognized that.
Just how exciting that is. I mean, that is just exciting. I'm curious, when did you realize your calling? When you realized you went from lawyer to basically a woman's advocate? At some point you saw something that triggered that. What was that?
Oh, it's gonna for a lot of your viewers and listeners, it may seem like a small thing, but I think it was building, right? Like I'd had that wake up call with Jade, but I bounced back to the old ways once we were out of crisis mode, right? I'd had a few other sort of warning signs but it wasn't until it's like a toxic poison, right? When we're constantly showing up in that very masculine fight mode all the time, it starts to affect your professional relationships and then your personal relationships and ultimately your sense of self. And the trigger for me, Aaron, I think, was one night I was having just a simple conversation with my son, my middle kid. And I thought we're just having a normal conversation. I could see him getting more and more frustrated. And I'm thinking, what is going on? And all of a sudden he's just like, for God's sake, Mom, does every discussion with you have to be an argument that you win? And it was like somebody held up a mirror and I did not like what I saw. And that's when I started digging in and asking around and recognizing, and for women in particular, but both, women either shy away from negotiation because they don't want to be that barracuda, they don't want the conflict, or we bring that overcompensating energy like I did. So that really became my mission about recognizing, wow, you can actually get better outcomes by leaning into your skill sets, leaning into those feminine skills, whether you're a man or a woman. So I would say that was the turning point for me.
That's really amazing. It's great that the universe works like that because that's how the universe works. It steers us that way. But the power of the intuition, the power of the woman. I mean, that's true for men, but we're really here to focus on the women. But you call them feminine traits as if they're weak.
Yeah.
But they're really strong, right? They really are strong. Could
Absolutely.
you name the traits off again? You just mentioned them.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole list. There was and ironically, there was a huge study done on this a decade ago about that, 60,000 people and what traits people consider to be feminine versus masculine. But the start for my sort of art of feminine negotiation was, I call it that R-FIT model. It's just an easy acronym to remember, right? You are fit to be a powerful negotiator. So it's AREFIT. So it's assertiveness, rapport building, empathy, flexibility, intuition, and trust. But it really, at its core, Erin, it's about not coming to these discussions or potential difficult discussions or potential conflict, not coming from a place of competition where you're looking to win or exert power over, but coming from that more collaborative place, that place of empathy where you're truly seeking to understand, get curious, seek to understand and meet the needs of the other party. Whether, like you hit the nail on the head, whether it's with your kids, your intimate partner, service providers, or in the business world, whether you're dealing with multi-million-dollar contracts, it's recognizing that those so-called feminine traits are actually your secret weapon. They are the most powerful traits to get you better, more creative outcomes than that traditional competitive model. That was a real mindset shift for me, and I'm hoping to help share that with other people.
Well, that was a mic drop moment that right there. I'll tell you what, you know, I think leaning, you use this term a lot, several times now, leaning into those feminine traits that saws weak.
Yeah.
And they're really not. I call them, they're your superpower as women. And I think it's amazing how men as general, I'm gonna say men because the stereotypes that were developed and the weakness that we're accused you of being was created by men.
Hmm.
And I've been married 30 years, so I have great respect for women and their intuition, what they have to say.
Yeah.
But it's amazing to me that women are made to go into a room or to go into business or to go into life thinking they already have a chink in their armor. They're already been weakened by the stereotype, and that's not true. And I think it's when you talk about going in boardroom, I can imagine the level you were at as an attorney. But going that boardroom already you lost 2% of your oomph, your power
Yeah.
because you were no longer trusting them, the feminine traits.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you're talking about the elephant in the room, right? And it's interesting that you say it was by men because most of this conditioning are like unconscious, and that's why they're so dangerous, right? So insidious because a lot of us aren't actually aware of it, even when we think that we are. And it's not just bias by men against women, but it's bias by women against other women and even bias against ourselves. And if I can share with you, because one of the studies that I read that was such a shift for me, such an eye opener. They did it studies and they've run it numerous times with young women writing their SAT exams, right? So when they're going in, and half the control group had to identify whether their gender in advance, right? Simply check off whether they're male or female. And over again, Erin, when they did the study, those young women who were asked to identify their gender actually performed more poorly than the ones who didn't have to. So it's not just by that conditioning, right? Imagine the power of that kind of bias that we actually underperform when someone brings our femaleness to our attention. So part of my mission is helping to just raise awareness about the conditioning that holds us back, uncovering the blocks that we allow to decrease our power, reframing how we look at power, at conflict, at success, how we look at negotiation. So I love that you called that out.
Yeah, that really, that's if we only got 10 minutes, sometimes my podcast short on time, but if you were going to say, Cindy, I want you to tell something to women out there that are going to watch us. They're in business. What advice would you give them?
Okay, a great question. I would say the quickest advice I would give is to raise your awareness, get really intentional about how you want to show up. Stop seeing your so-called feminine traits as a liability and start recognizing what your strengths are. There's no one way to be a woman. There's no one way to be feminine. There's no magic to that. But a quick model I would share, I call it my 5W model. Just think who, what, where, when, why. Anytime you're going to go into a negotiation or a business deal, or whether it's with your partner, just consider, who do I want to show up as? Like, pick 3 words. Do you want to be calm, collected? Do you want to be bold? There's no right or wrong. Just get really intentional. Who are they going to expect you to show up as? Who needs to be in the discussion? Who shouldn't be in the discussion? Who's the other party? Like, think of all of the who's. Then consider your when and your where with intention. Choose your timing. Don't just wait and wait and wait and then blow up or hope things will sort out. Get really intentional about where you have your discussion. Be somewhere where you're going to be comfortable, where you're going to feel powerful. Choose your timing and know your what. Know the outcomes that you want and know your deep why. We often forget that. Even negotiating about money, it's never just about the money. It's what that means to you. So who, what, where, when, why. Raise your intention about leaning into your authentic strengths, and you are automatically going to elevate the outcomes and the results that you get by doing that.
That is awesome. So tell me about, you mentioned one of the movement I did pick up on. You do women on purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is the other one you just talked about? Talk something. What is it?
Sorry, say that again. I missed that.
What did you have another company you built that says something about talk or something?
Okay, well, I've got Women on Purpose, and I also do like the Art of Feminine Negotiation, and I do
Okay, that's it.
Yeah. And I've also still got my law firm, Watson Labor Lawyers, but my passion is definitely my Art of Feminine Negotiation. And I do some work with lawyers. I call it practicing with purpose as well, about, again, getting away from that adversarial, competitive, soul-sucking fight mode and finding a better way to practice so you actually get better results for your clients and you get better buy-in. That gets you longer lasting agreements. And, if you come thinking you want X and I want Y, and we're both think we're fighting about it, we're either going to split the baby or one's going to win, the other's going to lose. But when you come looking to understand each other's positions, or even one party really listening to understand the others, over and over again, you end up coming up with outcomes for both that are better than either of you could have expected. It's a beautiful thing to watch unfold.
I think that's so good to watching it unfold. I think all women out there need to realize they have a superpower.
Yeah.
And it's not what I'm going to end this way, but it's not what the stereotype tells you weak. You really can't take control. It's not you have a superpower. It's your feminine traits. So I'm asking you as women, be confident who you are. Don't buy into the stereotypes. Cindy, I can't think enough, but what is your social media? How do people get a hold of you?
Oh, yeah, beautiful. By all means, check out our website at womenonpurpose.ca. Loads of free resources there. I do weekly blogs, weekly podcasts, lots of free ebooks. So womenonpurpose.ca or artoffemininenegotiation.com. Either of those will get you where you want to go.
Okay, great. So now, are you also on YouTube? Do you have a YouTube channel or not?
I do have a YouTube channel, and that's under Women on Purpose as well. And all of my podcast interviews are also videoed. You can check them out. I've interviewed, former hostage negotiators on the art of negotiation. It's loads of interesting value there too. Thanks for mentioning that.
So everybody knows that watching this if you're watching this on replay, check the description. Take a minute and put some links to Cindy's work in the description of the video on YouTube and LinkedIn. And I think it's really important that there's one takeaway that I think if I twist this, and I'm not supposed to be doing what I'm doing because I'm a stroke survivor. I'm supposed to be subservient. I'm supposed to be a victim, but I'm not. But I think it's that parallel between a woman realizing who she is and how powerful she can be is life changing. Really, can be life changing. But so I'm curious, what is your ideal client? What is your ideal client that you want to work with?
Yeah, and thanks for being vulnerable and sharing that about the expectation that you're going to be a victim, because again, this applies for men and women and anybody who feels like they've been convinced that they have to bring that take no prisoners, tough person kind of approach. This will be a game changer for you. So I find, Aaron, I attract equally, when you talk about my ideal client, women who shy away, who feel like they don't ask for what they want, they make themselves a little smaller, they're a little afraid of stepping into the full force of their power. Those women tend to be attracted to my programs so that they can step up more to ask and get what they want, be a little bolder. But equally, I find that I also attract, professional women or entrepreneurial women who have for quite some time been the barracuda within their industry, where they've brought that really overcompensating energy and they're paying a really high price for it. And they want to be able to tap back in to some of that more natural feminine strength and power to be able to get those better results. So either end of the spectrum, I think we've got loads of stuff that will help you be able to get more of what my tagline is how to get what you want from the boardroom to the bedroom. So it just means personally and professionally, how to be able to get what you want.
That is really great. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
want since right here is an entrepreneur I know personally. Her name's Sherry Patterson. She's in Niagara Falls. She wants to thank you for being here. So I appreciate it, Cindy. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And thank you, Sherry, for listening in.
All right. Thank you. Talk to you later, Cindy.